So you join us today on another still day at Bawtry Golf Club. So I think we've got a wind of about, what do you reckon, Foz, today? 20 mile an hour, left to right and into. So it's the perfect opportunity to do a driver in the wind video. So we're going to talk about how do you control your ball flight when the conditions are far from favourable. And can you control your ball flight? These are high risk shots when the weather conditions aren't particularly great, but we can reduce that risk by being able to shape the ball both ways. And also without the loss of distance, because that's the thing, when we're into the wind, we want to be able to still get that ball up there so we're not leaving ourselves too much to do into the green. So we want to be advancing it as far as we can, being able to shape it using the conditions to keep the ball in play. And so therefore, starting the ball on line, starting the ball more on the fairway as opposed to being forced to starting it right or left, and then basically praying the conditions are going to do us a favour and bring it back into play. And that's the perfect example of how to do it. So that was a fantastic control ball flight in these conditions. Foz, how did you do that?
Well, I think what I usually do in tournament conditions is go to the toilet, get my wrench and just bring it down 2 degrees. No, we discussed about this before. I mean, you know more the technical side, but for me, I've got a lower ball spin, so I do it my own way like most tour players do. But I like to feel a shallower arc on a high tee peg. I don't tee it down. I like to feel a shallower arc on a high tee peg. I almost practice starting the ball low from a high tee peg. Due to practice and stuff and experience on launch monitors, almost taught myself to keep the spin off the ball as well, which helps a lot in windy conditions.
Yeah, so you might not have the luxury of a launch monitor, but what you do have is you've got the ball flight to look at and pick up on the characteristics of that ball flight that Foz was talking about, spin. And how do you know if the ball's got too much spin? Well, it's going to start doing this, it's going to start climbing, and into the wind that's going to be instantly noticeable. If your ball starts climbing, it's just going to fall out of the sky and it's going to be losing loads of distance, and as it starts to accelerate on the ascent, the wind starts to take over and it's going to blow you off course. So keeping the ball low with less spin is basically the optimal way of playing it.
I mean, it's probably the one time a tour pro actually wants the ball to go over, because they don't tend to like the look of that shot, you know, and tour pros don't tend to hit it that way, you know, they crunch it now, but it's almost a bit like the
ball's doing that instead of
exactly.
that.
It's a bit like learning, like, you know, learning this, because you don't use it that often. It's a bit like learning a specialist shot, or in a way, just getting the ball to go over, and that's how you still get the same distance into the wind, rather than somebody who doesn't understand the spin. You try and hit it harder, it spins up, goes shorter. Classic combination, you know. Yeah. That's what you learn from the playing side of things to take out onto the course.
Because a general misconception with keeping the ball low is to tee it low. But what that does as well is that brings the bottom of the club into place, and this brings gear effect into play, because if you hit it off the bottom of the club, what's going to happen is you're going to increase the spin rate, which is going to create...
Low launch.
It's going to launch low, and then it's going to spin up. So if you think about any other ball sport, so think of tennis, which is, I think, the first sport that comes to mind for this. If you're trying to play a ball flight like that, okay, what's the kind of movement pattern you're going to be making with the racket? It's going to be going up, but the face of the racket is going to be angled down. It's going to be like this. So you've got an angle of attack on the up, but you've got a loft on that racket that is down. So essentially in golf, what we're talking about is spin loft. So you've got the loft of the club face, and you've got the angle of attack of the club. And what we're doing is we're reducing these. So what Foz did on that shot there, he brought these two close together. What the average golfer does, and we see this a lot here on the range when they first come, is they've got a big gap between the loft and the angle of attack.
The parameters widen, yeah.
And so now you've got a lot of spin on that ball. And the thing is, if you have a lot of spin on the ball and you're slightly off, suddenly you're going to get a lot of curvature, increasing not only the launch, the spin rate, but also potentially dispersion left and right. So bringing that loft down, bringing that angle of attack closer. And the $1 million question is, how do you do it? And the answer is, there's loads of different ways. We've got to find our way. But keeping this thing more externally focused, not getting too internalised with swing mechanics, that's not the way forward, because think of the tennis shot again. To get that ball flight with a bat in your hand, you're not thinking about the mechanics of what you're doing with your arm, your body, your feet. You're thinking about the ball flight, and you're reacting with a release pattern that's instinctive. And that's what we need to tap into, the instinctive aspect of the swing. That's what makes these players so good, because we had a chat before this video about what we're going to talk about. And it was all, we had to interview Foz basically to find out what he does to play these shots, because a lot of these players are doing it on instinct. It's quite hard for them to actually define in a translatable way what they do in a coherent way for us, because they've got a skill set that's been developed over a long time and this becomes natural to them. They're seeing a shot and playing it. They don't need to add language, context to it, because they can do it already. They're already doing what we want to do. We want to get a bit of information from them, but we want to make it translatable, understandable and actionable. So that's what we need to do first, Foz. We need to make this actionable for everyone. We can drive this visually. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to look at launching the ball through the hoop, which is what Foz was talking about, keeping the loft down, yet swinging up. So swinging as if we were trying to hit the ball above the hoop. Foz, if you were to simulate without a ball first...
I get a visualisation of the arc that I'm swinging on. Obviously the ball's off the ground, I feel taller, and as you're coming up, I feel like the loft on the club almost stays down, so that the kind of finish position's a lot more like that. So I'm still coming up and out, but I've controlled the spin at that end a little bit more, i.e. the tennis shot, like you say, like a topspin forehand.
It's essentially like throwing a ball into the ground, but you're going up as you do it, and that's essentially what you do to get power. You go up, but the ball gets released down. So if the club was in my hand and I was swinging, I'm hitting down, striking, keeping the loft down, but the action, the arc that Mark's talking about, when he's talking about the arc, he's talking about this direction, not left and right. He's talking about vertical, up and down. The action's up, but the actual loft of the golf club is down. When we talk about lofting down, we're talking about angling the face down. So essentially, just angling the shaft down. That's more up, and then we've got the club now pointing more down, yet the golf club can be travelling on the up. So the club's travelling up, but the loft is down. So what we'll do, Foz, is we're going to show you guys how to apply this in your practice with the magic hoop. Okay, expertly made. We're going to place that, or you're going to place this in front of yourself on the range. Be careful if there's people hitting. We're not responsible for any injuries, I'm afraid. So now we've got a target, but that's only for the launch, and that's a reference point really. So launch of the ball, and we're going to think about angle of attack too. The feeling of the arc that Foz was talking about. Is the club travelling up? Is it travelling down? Where do you sense that through impact? So Foz, do you want to hit a shot and go for
a normal
shot? So maybe normally what we're trying to do is launch it high, still keep the spin loft down, but the angle of attack's going to be up. So launching it above the hoop probably, with a swing that is also angled up above the hoop. So it's kind of going that way. That's the trajectory of the club head, if you like. And that's an awesome flight. So as always, calls it, plays it to order. So that was a angle of attack on the up, loft up, and now we're going to do the opposite. So now we're going to loft it down. So that means the face of the club is going to be angled down as it's travelling up. So the loft is down as the club's going up. The loft's not going up with it. And it's this that's going to give us some reference, because if we get the same flight as before, then we know we've released it similar to what we just did. So we've not really made any effective change, and sometimes the change might feel huge to get a small change in the outcome. And that's what we have to explore, because that's the difference between feel and real.
Very similar feeling body wise, so I'm still wanting to come up on it.
Extend.
Exactly. But with that, I get a feeling that on the arc, the face just stays. I mean, again, I use visualization. It'd just be more of a finish that sort of way.
Brilliant.
You know, and again, a cliche essentially, but you know, I still feel like, you know, I'm not trying to hold on to it or anything. I'm still using my body properly through visualization. You know, I basically, I say the same thing. I'm photographic in my mind,
Yeah.
so I use visualization for a lot of my stuff.
So, contrary to the notion that you would kind of, maybe you hear the covering the ball, staying forward, hitting down to hit the ball low, we're actually doing the opposite with the driver. We're using that vertical force because we want the distance. We're still firing the sequence, but it's the release pattern that's keeping the ball down, and it's your recognition, it's your awareness of your feel of what's happening. What's the trajectory of the club head? Is that going up? Is it going down? And the orientation of the face to that trajectory. And that's what this is doing. It's splitting the two, so you can recognise the two.
That's where technology comes in, and learning for yourself, etc. You're still hitting it on the up, and that's the key to still carrying it, although it's coming out low. Because if you cover it, stay in, which would, I'm at an age, I know you wouldn't believe it, but I'm at an age when we used to get told to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And people hit it less distance into the wind.
Yeah.
They don't do it anymore.
The old persimmon woods and stuff like that,
exactly.
you had to launch it low because it was going to spin up anyway. So you had to hit down. So technology's changed everything.
So you're still coming up on it using the dynamic loft to keep it down.
Awesome. If we actually recognise a bit more about the characteristics of the swing, like Foz was talking about, what is happening here? What are you actually sensing through the hitting area? What's it feel like to de-loft the club? And it might be worth just hitting some shots at say 50%.
It is trial and error, definitely. Finding your own way is definitely trial.
Maybe slow it down a little bit so you can actually get a sense of what is taking place, and then speed it up a little bit. Let's just hit a few, Mark, if you don't mind, just launching it low. Normally with a driver, people might be trying to keep it low by either hitting down,
yes,
or not changing enough, really, because they're still swinging up, as opposed to this now becomes the loft, and the swing is going that way, above the hoop, instead of trying to swing and loft it through the hoop up here.
Well, it's testing me. This is low.
How low can you go? What a shot. What a shot.
See, and I'm using visualization there because we've got those trees down there. So I'm looking at the hoop, and then I'm looking up there, and I'm picturing my fly through two different things. So I was testing myself. Well, Marcus is testing me here, and then just to go to another level, I've tested myself that just got above, but I was trying to keep it within the height of the trees, which is probably, well, very difficult. But I mean, just you can talk about tuning in and stuff. You can just take it to different levels. I think a good place to start is your natural shot, and realise where that comes out, and then realise how you can change things through club face, body movement, how you can change flight, environment. Can you keep it below a tree? Can you start it above a tree? All this stuff. It's stuff we do. It's our experience. We were out on the course with the boys yesterday. Sam and I were out there. We were doing a similar thing with irons. Now we're doing it with woods. Get out there and, as you say, find your own way.
How do you swing up and launch the ball low? How do you swing up, launch the ball high, and launch the ball with the swing up? It's a variation on the draws and the fades that you see in the lesson videos, where we're really working. We're doing the same thing, but we're working left and right.
Instead of going out that way, you're going that way.
So this is how you control the vertical element of the golf shot. It's the same as the horizontal element. You're just doing it in this plane. So it's kind of working up and down the hoop with the feel of the swing and the awareness of the club face, and that's really just through exploration, like Foz says, and that's how these guys that get that good, and that's how we can hopefully get good too. So I hope you've enjoyed that, guys. Thanks, Foz. That was awesome, mate. Well done.
Cheers, boss.
And let us know how you get on, guys. Any issues, any questions, don't hesitate to comment. We're not always playing our best, so we've got a feedback from our play on the golf course. Utilise that feedback and then apply that in the practice, and that's what we want to know. That's the information we need to help you guys with more tutorials. So all the best, guys. Good luck with the practice, and see you soon.